Welcome to Talk It Up, a Christian parenting podcast where our goal is to discuss 21st century topics to help you raise your kids. Hey, we are super excited that you've tuned back in for Talk It Up, a Christian podcast for parents just trying to help them navigate the kids they have in their homes. I am very excited today to introduce you to my guests. I have with me today Kimmy Lochner. She's the director of kids here at Mount Bethel Church. I have Hannah Wild. She's a high school leader for us. And I have Garrett Shiplett. He's a high school leader for us as well, as they go ahead and fist bump. Of course, you guys would. And the reason I'm really excited about this is we got together and we said, what do parents want to hear and who do they want to hear from? And we talked about this idea that parents want to hear from students who are just outside of living at home, just outside of hanging out with mom and dad at the house, just outside of college. And so this is what we've done is we are bringing you three of those people. And I'm super excited that you guys have joined us. How are you guys today?
Good.
Good. See, I told you we were going to laugh a little today, right? Hannah, that's really awesome. Garrett, you good?
I'm living the dream.
All right. No calculator on the desk. Inside joke right there. So to get us started, guys, what I'd like to talk about is what we just said, but this is really a conversation that I've entitled Hindsight is 2020. And I would really love opinions and insight and all of the stuff that you guys can bring into the conversation to help our families and to help our parents navigate raising kids in the 21st century, how faith plays a part of that, what things they can do, what things they might want to shy away from, maybe some great things and practical advice that you guys bring to the table, and also maybe some challenges that came up and some things that you wish maybe could have gone a little differently in your home, or things that you would even tell your parents, hey, I really wish that we'd have done this differently in my house when it came to my faith. And so that's the backdrop, and this whole concept is shaping faith in our students and shaping faith in our kids and how parents play a part of that. So this is what we got to do first. We've got to get a little backdrop on each one of you. So we have to give our listeners an insight into who you are and kind of, where, you grew up and maybe some makeup of the family. And so Kimmy, because you're to my left, I'm going to go ahead and start with you first. So you give us a little backdrop on your family and how you grew up.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Smyrna, so right around the corner.
Okay.
And it was really just me, my mom, and dad. I have a half brother, but he's 11 years older, so I don't remember him being around quite as much when I was super little. And so we were kind of the three musketeers and did everything together. And so that's where
awesome.
I came from.
So Smyrna, right around the corner from us.
Right around the corner.
All right. So good deal. All right, Hannah, you're next.
So I'm from Brunswick, Georgia, which is by St. Simon's, because a lot of people have no idea where Brunswick is, so I always have to say St. Simon's. But yeah, my parents are divorced. They got divorced my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
I have a younger sister and a younger brother, so I'm the oldest.
Okay.
Grew up in church, and then kind of fell away from church in high school, and then college got back into it. So. Yeah, it's
all right.
Backstory.
That's good. That's good. That's good backstory. So we can dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So the great part, before I get to you, Garrett, is we have different people to offer different opinions, which is fantastic. And now we go to Garrett. Fire away, buddy.
Yeah, so I was born and raised for a little while in Virginia, but then we moved down here to East Cobb. Third grade year, so I just kind of claim Atlanta and Marietta. I graduated from Walton, went down to LSU, go Tigers, and then
Go Tigers.
Graciously, God has brought me back to be able to serve the community that means, the world to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool.
All right. So as you can see, we have a lot of different backgrounds on the show today. So this is what we're going to start with. What's one thing spiritually that you think your parents did right in raising you?
I'll start.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, one thing that my parents always made a big point of is we are going to go to church.
Okay.
That was just right off the bat. It was something that was expected on Sunday mornings. If I was staying over somewhere, they would make it a point to know if that was something that we were going to be doing. And if somebody was staying over, it was always ideally on a Friday night, not a Saturday night. That way church could remain a part of what we did as a family on Sunday mornings. And I think that that's just so important that that's part of your routine.
Yeah.
It's an expectation on Sunday mornings.
At what age do you remember them setting that expectation?
Yeah, so we actually in Virginia went to a very small church in Bon Air, Virginia. It is outside of Richmond. If Richmond can have suburbs, that's where we were. And it was one of those things that the only like kids ministry they had was run by the parents that had kids in the church. So they would rotate every month. And I just like some of my earliest memories were making these little fish pretzels that we would do, or making soap. But it's funny, but at the same time, you remember being at church from, I mean, before I really could probably even read and write, honestly.
Yeah. So you were one of the first makers of goldfish before it was like fish,
Holy
pretzels,
goldfish.
holy goldfish. That's
Holy
awesome.
goldfish. Extra flavor blasted. So
Okay. So I love it because, you know, families get into rhythms, and one of the rhythms that we constantly talk about is, and we talked about this in the last podcast with Jody and Shelley Ray, is they had priorities in their family. And it sounds like the priority in your family was, this is what we do. And there was a reason for it, and you knew what that was, and it was a consistent thing that you constantly went to church. So great things spiritually growing up. I'm going to move on to, you knew Garrett was going to go first, so now it's you guys can go second or third, whatever way you want to go.
Well, I'm going to echo Garrett that was really the biggest thing for my family as well. Church, like you asked him what age, do you remember that? I don't remember it not being a part of
got
life.
it, yeah.
And just that was so integral because as I got older, I wanted to be there, right? It kind of became home away from home. I can remember in high school, like I got my license and I was excited to be able to drive to church because it was right by school. And so I'd drive by and be like, oh man, who's there? Who can I go bother or annoy, you know, as an annoying teenager? And I mean, it was just where I wanted to be. And I think it was because that had been such a priority growing up for us. Like it was the same thing. It was just a non-negotiable, whoever's spending the night, you're coming with us or vice versa. And so that was huge for us.
Okay. Yeah. I love it. It's really great. Hannah?
Yeah. My story's a little different once I get to high school, but before my parents got divorced, church was a big part of our life as well, and went to Sunday school. And when we moved to Brunswick, that's like the best and biggest church family that I remember having. And my parents, you know, my mom was in the choir and did the worship band, and my dad helped with the sound. And so every Sunday morning we were there early, and being a church kid, like running in the church in the morning early at night, and being the first one to get the donuts that were for everyone. Like those are things that I remember. And thank goodness, like I got to be a part of the youth group before my parents split, because I had already had a foundation and a friendship with those kids that didn't disappear in high school. So yeah, growing up, it was a big part of my life. And you know, Bible studies at my house. My mom loves to host things, so they would always have a lot of our church family come over, and that was really special and important to me to also do with my future family. And was just a good foundation for what was eventually to come a little bit later on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we're giving very church answers right now. And it's this question of, what did your parents do spiritually that really impacted your faith? And I'd have to say I'm the same way. So I grew up in church. But one of the other things that I very much remember when I was a kid was my dad would read the little devotions to us. And every morning we had to, you know, go through this devotion. And I got to be honest, I hated it when I was a kid because I wanted to eat breakfast. I wanted to go to school. So I'll be 100% honest, is that it's like, Dad, why are we doing this? Dad, why are we doing this? Dad, why are we doing this? I just want to go. And he stayed consistent with it, which is, I think, is a really, really big thing. And what I've heard from the three of you and what I felt when I was a kid was that consistency spiritually was a very big thing for all three of you when you were young. Is that fair? Okay,
Yeah.
Got it. So I firmly believe in that. I believe in consistency spiritually. It puts you in great rhythms. It puts priorities in your life, and I love to hear that. So I'm going to spin the question the other direction. Besides going to church every Sunday, what's the best thing your parents did spiritually while you were growing up? So besides taking you to church, because taking you to church is a physical thing. I think it's great. It's awesome. But one of the things we talk about all the time here at Mount Bethel Church, and every other ministry around the country talks about all the time, is we have an hour, maybe 2 a week. What happens in the rest of the week? when parents get their kids home, their spiritual influence far exceeds the time that we have. So besides just taking you guys to church, do you have an example of something that they did spiritually outside of just taking you to church on Sunday mornings? Silence speaks volumes on this one. Let me ask it a different way. Is there something you wish that your parents would have done differently besides just taking you to church on Sundays that would have impacted you spiritually in a deeper way?
So I think for me, my parents made church such a priority, but then the conversation tended to stop at the door. And it's not that my parents didn't want to have that conversation, I think. I think they didn't know how or felt like, do I know enough to teach her these things? And, you know, it was some of that.
Yeah.
And so my spiritual journey became really private. And even now, I feel, which, you know, it is private, but absolutely it's something to be shared. That's why God calls us into Christian community. But even now, like, I can get up in front of a room of people and pray better than I can pray with somebody one-on-one. I think because those conversations weren't taking place. I wasn't hearing my parents pray. I know they prayed for me, but I didn't hear it. I didn't, you know, learn what words did they use or how did they talk to God? What was their relationship in that way? And so it was just something that was just so between myself and God, and thank God for church and, you know, being that conduit. But it was, I wish that conversation had taken place a little bit more. Yeah. And, you know, I've shared that with my parents now, and it did stem from a place of comfort of that was out of my comfort zone to have those conversations. Like, the pastor should be leading that, or, you know. Yeah.
So you've talked with your parents about that, and they've relayed to you that they didn't feel comfortable having those conversations. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Okay. So for parents listening now who might not feel comfortable having those conversations with their kids, maybe they don't feel equipped, what's like one practical thing that you could give them, or encouragement that you could share that they could take away from this? And they say, hey, I don't feel comfortable doing this post-church. I mean, when I leave from church, it's really great. You know, Jesus is wonderful. Yep, pray to God. Everything is great. But when we get home and I'm not equipped for my kids or my teenagers or before they leave my house, what's one thing that you could share?
I think the biggest thing would be, don't be afraid to wonder with your kid. It is okay to not have all of the answers. They're not looking to you to have all the answers. If they are, they're looking the wrong place, right? You cannot have all the answers. You cannot have it all together. It's okay to wonder with them. It's okay to question with them and journey with them through Scripture to figure it out together. But just have the conversation when it's uncomfortable, or when they're like, don't even want to talk about what happened at church, right? They're going to, especially if they're teenagers, they're going to push you back on it. What'd you talk about at church this morning? Oh, nothing. You know, dig deeper. Make it uncomfortable for a minute for you and them. But it's that consistency that you just hit on earlier. Make it that habit. I think that's the key.
Okay.
Yeah, it to kind of stem on that, one thing that I noticed was the Bible and Scripture was never part of like the family household for us. Yeah. It was, I was just convinced that it was something that the pastor would read from in order to give this really long talk before, you know, at church, but it was never something that we integrated into it. And I found out, you know, once I went off to college, I was pushed back by a question is like, well, what do you actually believe? And I didn't have an answer for that, because it was just like, well, I think this, but it ended up being all these scattered answers because there was nothing that I was like super grounded in. And that goes back to, you know, you take the pulpit away from my faith. Whenever I was young, I didn't have anything. And I think you talk about, you know, being consistent and pushing. I really just wish that they had put in the effort to do it, right? And I think it's that idea of, don't let the uncomfortableness of it stop you from doing it, because not doing it at all can be a big deal. And if you ask that question, it's like, what do I say if they answer this? Yeah. We have to be aware that like there's an enemy that's going to want you to not ask that question.
Yep.
Right.
And he's going to put doubts all in your mind is that you aren't equipped to answer it. But if you get in that car and you're thinking, I can't have this conversation, or I don't know how to ask this question, I don't know where to go with this, I truly believe in the power of prayer. Just be like, God, I want you to guide this conversation. Give us 10 minutes on the car ride home where we get to just take a next step, because the Lord can use that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Absolutely, I love it. Hannah, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think with Kimmy, my personal walk with God was private and did become private because I'm the oldest of my 2 siblings, so I didn't really have any older role models in my sibling group, and even my cousins, I'm the oldest, which awesome because everyone loves me, but it was hard because I didn't have anyone to look to outside of my family, and my parents didn't really bring that into the house. One thing I do think that they did a good job on was just getting really connected with the church family and connecting us with that.
Yeah.
But even as Garrett was talking, it came in my mind, that was a great social aspect of the church. There wasn't a big spiritual aspect of the church, if that makes sense. I remember Halloween parties my mom would host with our church family and family friends, and it was awesome and just a really good time. And it, clean, fun, and it's sweet and it's good, but it's social, it's not spiritual. And Sundays after church, we'd go out to lunch with friends and have a good time, and you have a good Sunday, and then you get home and you just do the rest of your Sunday activities, and church kind of stays the 9 to 12 hour. So I think that that's something that I lacked, and I don't think, it's not that for my parents, I don't think it's that it was uncomfortable for them. I don't think they knew how to do it. And I don't think that they knew it was necessary.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So I'm literally blown away right now because you guys have landed on two both sames, my kids called it when they were little. So y'all grew up in Christian homes. Y'all were taken to church and you had really great rhythms and that was wonderful and all of that. And then you all echoed the same thing, that it kind of stopped at church and there became this not so great spiritual part that happened in your families after church. Is that fair?
Yeah. There's a line though. You said something, you grew up in a Christian home. And if you talk to Galen, our discipleship pastor here, she says, she put it in a way that I think just so accurately really described what it was we were a church attending home.
Okay. Yeah.
We weren't a Christian home, because if all we did was go to church on Sunday, but those rest of the spiritual aspects were just absent. Yeah. And the 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. Yeah. It's really hard to label yourself as a Christian home.
Yeah, fair. Absolutely. No, I could absolutely, I appreciate that 100%. Sorry. No, go ahead, Kimmy.
No, I do think there were little things though that my parents did outside of church. Maybe it wasn't a solid conversation or hey, let's do this devotion every morning or something of that nature. But I just remember vividly riding in my parents' car, and I can't remember anything playing hardly besides worship music, especially in my mom's car.
Yeah, that's good.
And those little subtle things that I'm my parents valued me having a Christian education when I was younger. And I think it was some of the same. It was kind of the let me take you and let them do it, because we're a little apprehensive and don't know where to start. So, but they've got it. They're trained to do this. And I think those were really big things.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great conversation that we can have next, is this idea that as parents don't feel fully equipped, and it feels like, you guys all felt that at some point, is there had to be somebody else in your life growing up that made an impact or drew you a little bit closer to God, or had a, just influence on your faith and whatever that is. And so your parents, although they felt a little bit uncomfortable, they put you in places that somebody else could be a part of that. So next question. Besides your family, who was instrumental in your faith or your spiritual life while you were growing up?
Yeah, for me, and we talked about this a little bit in the lead up to this, but the role that one group of people that immediately comes to my mind are my grandparents.
Yeah,
specifically on my mom's side, because looking at what a Christian home was, that was people who were in the church, committed to the church, serving in the church. One thing that I mentioned that I just noticed right off the bat that even got my mind thinking about prayer was we were a God is great, God is good family at the dinner table. That's what we would say. But every time we went to my grandparents, my grandpa would actually say a blessing over the food in the family. And that was always just something that eventually became an expectation with him.
Yeah.
But I caught on at an early age that broke the norm of what I was doing on the weekly and what a blessing over the food and a prayer is actually supposed to look like.
Yeah.
So even small things like that, but people beyond the immediate family had an impact on me.
Yeah, I think grandparents are such a key role, and we have a lot of people who come to Mount Bethel Church. We're a very generational church. So if you don't know anything about Mount Bethel Church, very generational. It's been around for close to 200 years. And so it becomes a very big part of who we are inside of our organization. But I would not ever say that grandparents don't have spiritual authority, because they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
They can absolutely influence in a way outside of, parents being super involved or not, is they can do small things like that. So I love I grew up with an amazing set of grandparents, and the things that they've done for me over the course of my life, I can't begin to explain how wonderful that. I mean, I have stories of hanging out with my grandfather in church. He'd bring me orange Tic Tacs every single time I sat with him at church, and all I wanted to do was eat the Tic Tacs. But it was bigger than the Tic Tacs for him, right?
Yeah.
It was a consistency that he brought inside of my spiritual life that was wonderful. So I appreciate that. Grandparents are great. So
My grandma, literally when I was younger, would drive out of her way. She lived right by the church. She would drive about 5 minutes, I mean, it wasn't a ton, but out of the way of the church to come get me every Sunday to make sure I was at Sunday school.
Wow.
Because
Nice.
my parents didn't really have a Sunday school that they liked to attend. They were just, church service. And so she wanted me there that hour before church and in a Sunday school, and that was huge to me. And
Yeah.
like when I look back on that, the fact that she would take the time to do that and cared enough that it mattered that I was there and was learning and growing was huge.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so we've got some grandparents that are involved. Let's talk about people in the church.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some people in the church that greatly impacted your faith, but also how your parents were or were not a part of the people in the church, because parents can be on a journey together with us, and we're all in ministry together, and we have an opportunity to hang out with students and be a part of their lives, and we have parents who are super connected, and they are fully engaged with what we have going on. And I just want to get kind of an idea of what happened in your homes growing up, and how that related to people in the church. So you're talking about youth pastors, you're talking about senior pastors, other people that might be in the church. Talk to me about how those people played an impact and a role in your faith.
So there were these two older women at my home church that we went to before my parents divorced, Miss Jane and Miss Gail, and they were the absolute sweetest. And Miss Gail, before I actually really knew who she was, would send me letters for my birthday. Like, she knew my birthday, and she would send me a letter on my birthday, or she'd send me a letter for Christmas. And I think she did this with a few of the other youth girls. And then finally I got to an age where I was able to join their Bible study that they did, like every Tuesday morning at Chick-fil-A with high school girls. And I had a car so I could drive myself. And I started going every single week with them, and I went all the way up until I graduated high school, and just really got to establish a really close connection. And they had known my mom and my family and everything that had happened. And throughout the divorce, like Miss Gail sent me letters and checked up on me, and Miss Jane would call me. And I remember something had happened between my mom and someone else, and I just needed to talk about it. I needed to let someone know. And at that point, I had a great friend group, but it wasn't deep enough to where I could go to them. And so I called Miss Jane, and I was like, hey, can you please meet me at this coffee shop? Like, I just have to talk to you.
Yeah.
And she met me, and she just listened to me and prayed for me and cried with me. And it was just so special to have that relationship with her. And when I graduated high school, they gave me a brand new Bible, and she knit me a blanket that I still have, and just so tender. And even throughout college, like, they both supported me when I was on staff at Wesley, and ask about Josh.
That's so
and just
nice.
from a relationship that started before I even knew who they were. Like, they've just kept in contact with me and prayed for me and supported me. And yeah, it's just been very, very sweet. So, yeah.
How did, and I appreciate that. That's
Yeah.
so awesome. It's amazing that you're still in contact. And Josh is your fiance. So for people who didn't know, Josh's fiance, getting married in March, correct?
Yes.
All right. So that's going to be super awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned that your parents were divorced. So your parents this is after the divorce that your parents went through, right?
Yeah.
And, we have a lot of people who listen and they go through relationship struggles, and they might end up being divorced. And it becomes a very difficult thing sometimes to focus on other aspects outside of that broken relationship, which is hard. How did your mom, might be a tough question, how did your mom help push you along, or didn't she, with your relationship with these two great women who were in the church? Was she a part of that? Was she like pushing you along and encouraging you to be a part of that group, or was she absent from that?
I would say that my mom was absent from that.
Okay.
So after my parents divorced, instead of fighting for the church family that we had, she pulled us away from it. And so I was a freshman in high school, so I couldn't drive. And so for a year of starting high school and having a horrible, messy divorce going on, it was another cherry on top to be pulled away from my family at church. And so that was pretty tough. And when I was able to drive, that's when I started getting more involved back in the high school group with those girls, because I had been there for 5 years. Like, a lot of deep relationships happened in 5 years, and I just felt comfortable with them, and I didn't want to go to a new church. I didn't want to go to a new youth group. I was already going to a new high school. So so it was just the grace of God, because these two women kept in touch with me that year.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it was a little difficult. It's not that she didn't support it. I think she just wasn't in a place to look at what I needed versus what she
No, it's
needed.
totally understandable.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah,
Obviously it's
absolutely.
not an easy situation to talk about, and you don't, never want to talk badly about anybody, and I know that you're not, but it's important for people to understand that relationships don't work sometimes, but that impacts kids and students in a different way. But what I hear is this, maybe you can catch me if I'm wrong, is that there was a lot of foundation that was done when you were younger. You were brought to church, and that became a rhythm, and that became part of your upbringing. And even though that there was a speed bump later in life, you were connected enough inside of the church that you felt like this was a great place to continue to stay plugged into. And then along came other people to kind of nurture you along that journey. And so if you had never built that rhythm early on, do you think that you would have gone back to church how you went back, even though there was, your mom and the divorce situation?
Yeah, probably not.
Right.
And kind of like how Garrett and Kimmy said that their grandparents were big proponents in their faith.
Yeah.
My aunt was that for me. And I have great grandparents too, but she just, minute-wise lives closer to me. And during the divorce, like she was that rock for me. So I think she played a big part. I think me being old enough to where I did have a foundation of church with my parents and growing up that way helped me a lot. But my sister and my brother didn't have that. So they live very differently than me.
Okay.
Because they didn't have that foundation. And because my mom did take us out of church, they didn't get to grow up in that. So
Got it.
yeah, so it worked for me because I had the age. They didn't. And so I still wish, I just think for them, my mom could have kept us in there, and they would be at a different place in life than they are right now.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I believe that rhythms at a young age, can create a lifetime
yeah.
of connection. And the three of you guys have just, we've talked about it already. So that's fantastic. So, all right, I'm going to stop picking on you, Hannah. I appreciate it. But here's the deal. All that insight was really, really great.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you sharing that with us, even though it might not be a kind of a great time of your life and going through that with your parents and all that kind of stuff. So, all right. So, Kimmy, we talked about people in church.
Yeah.
youth people. I mean, you're director of kids here at Mount
Yes.
Bethel, and so you're very influential with parents and kids and all that. Was there somebody growing up inside your church that was really influential?
So there was, and it's funny because we're still connected, and she attends Mount Bethel here now. But she was my children's pastor growing up.
That's so
and I remember like early memories of her in Sunday school, and she did this event called Hands on Christmas that was just really big at our church, and just the joy she brought. I remember my grandmother, again, would take me up to church because I'd hang out with her in the summer while my parents worked, and she would work the front desk because that's what, she loved to do.
Yep.
And I would go hang out with the children's director because she'd be up at church with her daughter. And I mean, just those memories of just running around and her just pouring into me.
Yeah.
And she stuck with me through all those years. And then the church I grew up in had this really special program called Secret Saints. And in college, somebody would adopt you and be your secret saint, and they would pray for you and send you these sweet gifts. And she, of course, was over the top and beyond gracious in that, and prayed for me and loved me on through college when I went away to Ole Miss, and it was far from home. And now she's here and literally comes and like just pours in still to my life through pouring into the kids ministry.
Yeah, that's so amazing. That's awesome.
But she was one of the biggest, proponents of my faith from a really young age, and just one of my biggest supporters and encouragers, and like somebody that I just constantly knew was praying for me.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's really great.
She's the best.
Garrett, you got anybody?
Yeah, so I'm going to name drop 3
Let's
people
do it,
and
man.
they have
Do it.
no idea.
They have no idea they're going to get named.
2 of my small group leaders that
Okay.
I had growing up were John Painter, or 3 of them, John Painter, Scott Lane, and Mike Banks. And they may never hear this.
Yeah.
But they had us from 6th grade, and typically you just kind of fall back down at 8th grade. But they wanted to invest in us, so they just kept going through high school.
Yeah.
So I had this same group of leaders from 6th to 12th grade, and they kind of just saw us grow up. I mean, there's pictures of our small group in Mike Bang's basement from 6th grade up until senior year. And you can just see us just grow up and grow a part of it. But the commitment that they had, because Matt, you have 2 high school boys, like you just know, like they can be a lot sometimes.
Yeah, they can.
But the commitment and the patience that they had with us was something that was super special. But they were older and had kids, my age, and they were just parents investing in the youth ministry. But another guy that I'm going to name drop is someone named Chris Mokros, who's 3 years older than I am. But he was kind of this like senior that, I looked up to whenever I was a freshman, and then he ended up being a college counselor at the camp that I went to. He actually just got married, but
Nice.
Chris and I still talk, and we're in a fantasy football league together.
Of course you are.
And but the difference between the age gaps on those 2, I think, was really important to me as well, where I had these people who weren't my parents, who were older, that could offer that patience and wisdom, and they just kind of knew, like, if we can just sow this seed in their life, and it might be arduous and tough, but we're going to be there every Sunday investing.
Yeah.
And then you had somebody like Chris that he was somebody that I could see and visualize and look up to. And both were all were.
That's awesome.
All were important.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Appreciate you sharing. That's so good. All right, so we're going to turn the corner a little bit, and I want to give you guys a stat, and you guys know this because we talk about it. 70% of students raised in church leave the faith by the time they're 22, which is right in the middle of college. So, quick hit question. Did you stay connected to faith when you left high school for college? Kimmy?
Yes, but not I was not going to church every Sunday like I grew up. It looked a lot different, and it was really my sorority that kept me connected. Weirdly, like that's not normally the story, but
All right, I'm gonna come back to that in a second. So we're gonna go on that in a second. Hannah,
Yes.
you stayed connected.
Oh yeah, I think the Lord had great plans for me, and
Okay.
yeah, so
Perfect.
it was obvious.
Awesome, Garrett.
Yeah, yes and no. Freshman year, I went once a month. Communion Sunday, that was what God was going to get.
Got it.
But it turns out that the Lord can use an inch and go a mile.
For sure.
And that's what ended up happening.
All right.
So.
Well, Garrett, you already have the mic. So what I would like to unpack now is this, because you all stayed connected. What kept you connected? So you think about it this, I have a kid going to college next year. And we tried, we've done everything that we possibly can inside of the house. And we launch Cooper next year to college. Our hope is that he has a faith of his own and that he can take it to college and he can hold on to it. So I'm going to ask all you guys, we're going to go backwards and ask you the question, what kept you or who kept you connected to your faith when you left? Because we talk about lowering the percentage of the 70% all the time. So what kept you connected to your faith?
Yeah. And I need to preface it. Before I went to college, I was a special event kind of kid my junior and senior year.
Okay.
So I want to tell the parents, it's like, it's not you just going every Sunday that lays that awesome foundation, because my junior and senior year, that's not where we were at.
Okay.
So whenever I say what kept me connected, besides obviously just the Lord's provision, was this idea. It was really, I can't say anything besides the Holy Spirit, but John Painter, on our last ever Bible study as a senior group, all of us showed up. It was like the first time in years that we had all been in the same room at the same time, and John was just like, I have one ask. You go to church your first 2 weeks that you're there.
Yeah.
So whenever I got down to LSU, he had some kind of voice in my head that I need to go to church within my first 2 weeks of being there.
Yeah.
And I went to a church. And like I said, the Lord will take an inch, go a mile. He started to put people in my life that would just ask about my faith. If you're in the ministry at all, you've heard me talk about Matthew Fletcher.
Is that the imaginary friend he keeps talking about? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page.
I met Matthew Fletcher my second semester freshman year, and it's just funny again how the Lord will put these people in your life whenever you need them. And he was the one who asked me, well, what do you believe? And I was like, oh, I believe this, and this. And he's like, yeah, that makes no sense. But it was, you asked what keeps you plugged in.
Yeah.
He then took that spot of, I'm going to pour into him. I'm going to disciple him. We're going to go to church. Yeah. And that was somebody who kept me invested, got me plugged into a college ministry, and the rest was history. So.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, so I hear from a parent's perspective is to make sure that your kids / students at that point are connected to someone.
Oh my gosh. It is the most important thing
outside of the parents. It is unbelievably important. So as parents, hey, we think we have all the answers and our kids are going to listen to us. That ain't true. It's not true that they're going to listen to dad as much as they might listen to another very important person in their life when it comes to staying connected to their faith.
Well, and I even think sometimes hearing the same things that dad might be saying, but hearing it from somebody that's not dad and going, oh, wait, my dad says that. Like it puts the puzzle pieces together of, well, maybe they're right.
Yeah.
Like that used to happen for me all the time with youth leaders of like, oh man, my
really
parents
good.
have been telling me that. Yeah. It just gives you that different perspective.
Yeah. John, John, I say that he had a voice in my ear. I mean, he wrote a letter of recommendation for me for college. So clearly there was some kind of connection. So whenever I went off to college, it wasn't this guilt, but it was almost like he has my best interest at heart. And if he thinks that I should go to a church within the first 2 weeks, then I probably should.
Nice. That's awesome.
So
cool. Hannah, what kept you connected when you left for college?
I think because in high school, my faith was just, that's like literally all I had to keep me sane and together, that going to college felt so good that my world didn't feel like it was crumbling every night, but that I was a little bit more like, okay, I have great roommates that literally, I never cried alone freshman year. It was insane. Like there would be so many times where I'd come home, I had just been home for the weekend and it was just really rough, and I'm in my dorm by myself, and then all of a sudden a roommate appears like right next to me, and I just feel like the Lord was so graceful of and gentle with me through that first year. And I was in a sorority too. The best thing I've ever done, oddly enough too. But the older girls in that sorority, like they were a part of campus outreach. A few were a part of Wesley. And they like took me with them, like would pick me up, walk with me, sit next to me, take me home, like every step of the way they were there with me. And it's just so important having those older girls as well. My big and my grand big were still really close. They're coming to my wedding, like just really awesome girls who kind of helped me stay connected in the faith. And my aunt was a part of Wesley when she was in college.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
And so she had hyped it up, and that was a big part of her testimony. And so already going in, I was like, I have to do it. Like my aunt did it. It was really good. Like that's where I'm going. And I mean, that was also a great community, just getting right from the start, jumping into a ministry and jumping in head first as well, because you know, you can ministry shop, but it's important to just stay put, because they want you there. And one of the girls on staff actually had remembered my name, and so it's like a few weeks after school started, and she was like, "Hey, Hannah," and literally I was like, "You know who I am? What?" And that was, you know, just another special moment to me where I felt like I'm important. Like this girl who is a part of this ministry, who has only met me a few times, knows my name. Like that means something.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I know that was a lot that I just said, but I just think it was a lot of sweet people and a lot of just like the Lord's favor.
Yeah, I love it so much though, because
Yeah.
when you go to college, you're going to connect with somebody
Yeah.
Yes.
and something.
Yes, you will.
Right? You chose to connect inside of a ministry program.
Yeah.
Far different than other things that you can connect into when you go to college. And so from a parent side of things, it's very important for us to make sure we know the connection points that students have when they leave the house. And I think it's a vital thing. So, you know, obviously it worked great for you. You met Josh
Yeah,
at
I
Wesley.
did.
I heard that story on the golf course last week, which was really good.
I know, it's so cute.
Yeah.
But that is true. Like even in my sorority, like I saw out girls who I knew loved the Lord. I didn't, and I think it was the Lord too, just guarding my heart. Like I didn't need to seek out girls doing other things that I knew weren't right for me. Like I don't know. I just feel like the Lord was like, here, you have a choice. You can be friends with these awesome girls. And I took it, and I never was tempted to go off and party. Like I had fun on Friday nights because these girls were just genuinely fun, and I chose to stay connected with them. I didn't want anything else. Like that was just enough for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes total sense in the world.
And Matt, I think what you said, I don't want to miss this, because I don't know that any students will listen to this. It might only be parents. But there is nothing better than having a group of people that cares about you.
Yeah.
And it's like, you even look at our high school students, whatever you're searching for, typically it's probably just to be seen. It's probably just to feel valued.
That's right. Yeah.
And what's so important for us as youth leaders and you as a parent and students is this idea of, is my kid seen and valued? And that can start in the house. That starts whenever you walk into the garage. I want you to know that you're seen and valued, maybe standing outside with a sign and a cup of coffee that says you look amazing today or you belong here. It sounds stupid to 90% of the world, but to that one person that had just a really crappy Saturday, it could mean something, because what we care about, and this is what Christ offers us, right, is to be seen and valued. And that's what it sounds like, Hannah, was just important to you.
Yeah, and it should, honestly, it should start in the house with your family, because if it doesn't, that student is going to go somewhere else. And who knows if they're going to find it in a ministry? Who knows if they're going to go there first?
That's right.
We hope that's it, but it typically isn't, right? You know, that's not where we genuinely see
it all goes back to one of the conversations we had to start, was this idea that, hey, it might be uncomfortable for you to have these spiritual conversations, but you need to have these conversations with your kids, because it's going to get here before you know it, and your kid's going to run off to college. And that foundation and the consistency and those uncomfortable conversations can actually lead to really great decisions down the line. And then you can offer advice of, hey, you really need to be connected when you leave here because of this. And it becomes an easier conversation because you've had uncomfortable conversations earlier in life.
Matt, I mean, this is something that we, might be too much for the podcast, but I think is important to note is if your kid doesn't understand why sex is between you and your wife, right? Then they step into a college hookup culture, and you never had that you never had that question, and they never got that answer. Then you can't be shocked whenever something happens, and it's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't know how hurtful this would be for me.
I didn't know how hurtful it would be, but that's why you have to have those conversations. Is at some point in their lives, they're going to be faced with, why do you believe what you believe?
Yeah.
And if you never ask that question, I mean, by God, literally by God, it was somebody who actually wanted to push me towards the church asked me that question. But we have to recognize, like, that's the world we live in.
Yeah, well, and we can go ahead and shameless plug our next podcast, because our next podcast is that conversation. It's with a guy by the name of Barrett Johnson, and he's written some books. One of the books that we're going to talk about is called The Talks, and it's how do parents have sex conversations with their kids in a very healthy way and make them understand, the beauty of marriage and why that relationship is so God honoring when you let that happen. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's an uncomfortable conversation. I've had to have it with both of my kids. We continue to have it. We continue to make sure that relationships are placed in this very God honoring way. But it's an uncomfortable thing, especially if you don't feel equipped for it. So we'll shameless plug that one for next time, buddy.
The thing is, and that's just such an easy one to point to, because it's so out there and it's so in our world and it's so in your face everywhere you look. But that goes for anything. Why do you live the Christian life?
Yeah.
Why is it important to honor what you do? Why is it important to honor your body? Why is it important to treat people in a certain way? Why is it important not to gossip? All these things stem from the fact of here in the book. And if we refuse to have those conversations, I've rabbit trailed us so far. But my point,
so good.
My point is we have to recognize, like, shying away can sometimes be the worst. And you had people that were willing to meet you, and they didn't walk in the room and see Hannah, had a horrible day. It's like, yikes, and closed the door.
Right.
But rather, they were the ones that stepped in and met you there. And it's, how can we step into our children's lives? How can we step in as a youth leader? I want to meet you in those moments. Because, I mean, it could be life altering.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and back to, like, if a student isn't getting that at home, like, they're going to look for it in a different place.
Yes, sure.
I mean, my college experience compared to my sister's, absolute opposite. And she did look for everything she didn't get at home in the wrong place. And at that point, like, I can do the best job that I can as a sister who loves the Lord and also loves her, but I'm not her mom.
That's right.
I'm not her dad. I can't give her what ideally they should have given her. And so if that experience can just be wiped away for another student, I think it's so important for parents to recognize that it doesn't matter how uncomfortable they might feel, or if they're scared it might drive a wedge of having hard conversations or bringing Christ into the center of their relationship. It's a necessity, because Satan is out to get everyone. Like, he will win if we don't put our foot down. And like, it's just a big prayer of mine for my sister and even my brother going off to college next year. Like, I hope that the Lord can grab their attention, but it has to start in the home, to have that foundation. And
Yeah, awesome. All right, Kimmy, we're down to you.
Yeah.
So when you left for college, what kept you connected?
So Hannah talked about ministry shopping in college, and that was me, because I knew I left a really strong ministry that I'd been plugged into, and so I wanted that in college, and immediately didn't find anything that kind of compared. I went to Wesley. It wasn't what it is now at Ole Miss, and tried another few things, and so I kind of struggled those first couple weeks to month or so, and then Ole Miss did Rush back then late. So they did it like a month into school, so you kind of had met friends already, which was awesome. But I went through Rush, went in a sorority, and it's so funny because even God kind of gave little moments along in Rush that pointed back to that foundation at home. Like, I remember one of the songs they sang at Pref Night at the house that I ended up going was a song we sang in youth choir. And
Oh,
I
wow.
remember just like tears being in my eyes because I missed that at that point, right? I missed that Christian fellowship and just that family around me. And so I was missing that desperately. And so I was like, all right, God, got it. It's supposed to be here. And we go to chapter meeting the first week, and they're like, hey, we have these like 3 cabinet positions unfilled. Nobody wants them. Any freshmen want them? And one of them was the chaplain of the sorority. And I had been the chaplain of our youth choir, and like literally it was crickets. And so I was like, I'll do it. Having no idea what that meant at all. But it became, this way that God brought that Christian community back to me. Of now I was surrounded by these girls in our brother fraternity that it just brought that Christian community right back in and kept me grounded. And then every time I was home, I just longed to be at the church I grew up in.
Yeah.
And that
That's
was
great.
a neat feeling because it was like homecoming. Every time you went back, everybody was excited to see you. And that is just such a gift as a college kid that people care about you. They want to hear how you are, and they're invested in your life.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wasn't going to offer an opinion, but I have to because it's different than the 3 of you. Okay.
Let's hear it.
You sure? All right.
Yes.
And it's going to go quick because it could be a long story. So I disconnected from my faith when I went to college. And it wasn't on purpose. And it wasn't because my parents didn't do the right things. But it was because the priority conversations I had with my parents were not about how I was connected and who I was connected to. It was around different things. It was around sports and grades. Those were the priority conversations. And so if I can say anything personally, being someone when I was 18, I went a long ways away to college. Everything in my focus was based on sports. And, I'm not saying that was a bad thing, but I would say that make sure that you prioritize conversations in a spiritual way. Make sure you have those conversations. Hey, how are you connected? Are you connected going to church? Are you involved in a ministry? Have the conversation, because I didn't. And it was a very easy way for me to slip away and just be involved in stuff that, was just different and I shouldn't have been involved in. And so that's a much longer story, and it could probably be a podcast on its own. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I will say that looking back, and it was a long time ago, I'm older than you guys. Looking back.
Just a little.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't remember having the conversations with my parents on how I was connected spiritually.
Yes.
And that was a problem.
And I think too, though, that stems back to having those conversations now, like while
Yes.
they're in your home. Because
Absolutely.
if you're just starting them in college to check in on them and go, are you going to church? That's
Yeah.
not going to hit home with your kid. They're going to
That's
be
right.
like, no,
Yeah.
that's the last thing I want to do. So if you're not having them now to lay that foundation, then you've closed that doorway and it's really hard to open it back up, I feel like.
Yeah. But you should start.
I was about to say, you should
regardless.
always
Yeah.
start.
Start
Absolutely.
as young as you possibly can.
Yeah,
because
but it's never
It's
too late.
never
That's
too
right.
late to have
Absolutely.
it.
That's right. That's right. All right. So, guys, we've talked about a whole bunch. One final question, then we're going to wrap this thing up. Okay. It's not a big, long question. Just to give you a little backdrop. Kimmy's married, has a son. Hannah's engaged, getting married, and Garrett is not married at this time.
Single
Thinking about your future family. If there's one thing that you can share with our parents on, this is what I want to establish in my marriage and with my kids, to do the very best raising them in their faith, where they can have a faith of their own when they launch to college. If there was like one thing that you can share, this is what I want to do in my marriage, this is what I want to do for my kids. You guys are involved in church, you lead ministries, you lead students, you engage with parents, you have context that a lot of our parents don't have because you do this all day long and you see it much differently. If there's one thing, or maybe two, I'll give you two. One or two things that it's a non-negotiable, this is what I'm doing in my marriage and this is what I'm doing for my kids. What do you say about that?
It's you, Kimmy.
Okay. In my marriage, I would say one of the biggest things I've learned is at first, when we first got married, I was kind of like my parents, where I wanted to keep that faith so private that we didn't share things together. Like we both believed, but they were very separate things. Like we went to church together, heard the same messages, but we didn't talk about it. It kind of still, again, stopped at that door, right? And yeah, we prayed for one another, but I didn't hear my husband pray for me, or he didn't hear me pray for him. And so we kind of went through a little bit of a traumatic thing last year. And I remember Galen literally called my husband and said, I need you to pray for her tonight.
Wow.
And I remember hearing him pray out loud, and I was like, why is this not a part of our everyday?
Wow.
Why is this not happening more? Because it was so powerful and so meaningful. And so that has really shaped, the way that we share God with one another. And then just for our child, keep it simple and start small. Don't go home and hear this and try to change every single thing to go, I gotta have the conversations, we need a devotion every morning. Like, pick one thing, because if you go home and you do a 180 on your kid, it's not gonna be genuine. But for us, that's been, our son's 2.5. And I felt very convicted when we did the 3rd grade Bibles, and Jody from the pulpit looked at the 3rd graders and went, all right, go home and be on your parents about reading this Bible.
Yeah.
And I was like, I work at the church and I'm not reading the Bible with my child. But you're like, he's 2.5. How much could he retain? He is. Like the other night, he pointed and he went, Noah, because they've talked about it at preschool and things. Wow. And he asks for it now as part of like the bedtime routine. Read Bible book, read one more, and it's just become my favorite part of the day.
Yeah.
So like whatever that little rhythm is, church, absolutely. We talked about that being the rhythm, but what is a rhythm as a family that you can get into that is maintainable? It's not something that like, we're going to do this for a week and now we can't because sports have gotten crazy or life's gotten crazy. But what's that one like rhythm that would make a difference in your family?
Love
and can
it
you
so much.
start it?
Yeah, awesome. Sweet. Hannah, what do you have?
I would say prayer is a big one that I'd want to do with my future family and my kids, but also even Josh and I together. As an engaged couple, there's a lot of things we have to fight for and fight against. Yeah. And praying together about those battles is so important, because if we're fighting the same thing, like, why are we doing it separately? So that's something we're currently doing now together that I want to keep doing for when we get married. And I think one thing I want to do when we have kids, one day far off in the future, is read scripture together, to not keep my quiet time private. Because there was one time, it was like a year or so after my parents got divorced, and I hadn't seen my mom she had totally fallen away a little bit from the Lord. But I walked out into the balcony, like the deck or whatever, and I saw her reading her Bible, and it just did something in my heart. It was very encouraging, and it was sweet, and it was almost like, okay, God, like, let this be it, please. Like, let this just be the moment that she just scales are off, the veil is torn. And as a kid, I don't know, that was just so meaningful to me. And I want my kids to be able to like see me reading the Bible and see that, see me living that out. And there's always things to learn. Like, you never stop growing. And I don't know. I just want my kids to be able to see that, for me and Josh both. So
great.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Garrett?
Yeah, Kimmy and I were talking about it literally as we went to go pick up the coffee before this. But I think it speaks volumes. If church looks like an obligation to you, and following Christ looks like an obligation to you, whenever your kids are faced with the decision of, do I follow that or do I follow this? They aren't going to choose the obligation. Yeah. Right? So it has to look like something that you actually care about, something that you're invested in, something that you value, something that you're chasing after, something that you're growing in, something that you see value in. And I think about this, it's that living life with your church community. You want your kids to have a positive thought whenever it comes to, oh, that's church, right? Those are the people that have, potluck dinners, or those are the people that whenever my grandma was going through it, they all came over and they were at the hospital and they brought us food, and they have this positive association with the community and with the Lord. So whenever that decision comes along, because you have 2 boys, at some point in their life, they're going to have to make the decision, is this what I'm after, or is this what I'm after? You can't have your foot in both doors. you want them to be like, I saw how it impacted my parents and how they lived a happier, more fulfilled, purpose-driven life, all because they were chasing after the Lord. That's, I think, where I want to be is, it's not my life because I think that this is the right thing to do. It's my life because this is where I receive life.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think when you look at like the way your spirituality and your faith in Christ is passed down from generation to generation, there's this idea that if a parent sees it as an obligation, that next generation sees it as an option. And the one that sees it as an option, then their kids just are going to stop going.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it just becomes this decay that can quickly take root unless you're the one to change that, right? If you're like, it's not going to be an obligation, it's going to be literally what gives me life, is my relationship with Christ, then I think you can reverse that so quickly.
Yeah. So I love all those answers. I'll add one thing on that. Wendy and I talk about this all the time, but we talk about when you can have the small conversations with your kids, might be small to us, but it's big to them. That if you allow yourself to have those, what you look like, oh my gosh, why am I talking about Fortnite again in this right now? If you stay connected to your kids through those things that might feel insignificant to you, that the bigger conversations, it's easier to have those conversations and they become not as uncomfortable. The other thing I would say is it's always been very important for us to actually point back to God in all situations. There was a time years ago, and there was a very difficult situation that our family was going through. And I was sitting in the car with Cooper, and he was probably 14 at the time, 13. And he said, "Hey, are you really nervous?" And I said, no idea where it came from, but it showed up. And I said, no, God's provided for us in the past. He's going to do it again. I have no doubt. And that was it. And so just make sure that you invite God into the situations that are really difficult for you and point it out to your kids, because small things like that are really, really important to a kid. They see in real life, in real time, that, oh my gosh, I mean, my parents are so rooted in this. And they so believe what's going to happen through the power of God that it's really good. So y'all are fantastic. I will say this, parents, please, if you don't go to church here, go to church. But more importantly, plug your students into leaders like this, because this right here is more important than you could ever possibly realize it to be. Because when you have your student connected with another leader in their life, they're more likely to stay connected when they leave, and you can actually get resources from leaders like this to help you in the conversations you have with your kids at home. So start early, keep it often, right? You know, stay connected to your church, stay connected to the leaders inside of the church. It's all really important to develop those rhythms inside of your family. So I'm going to throw one more thing out there, because there's always this, I forgot to say this. So is there anything else that any of you would like to say to any of our parents when it comes to raising kids? Looking back at the way you were raised, is there anything that you just want to throw out there just to make sure that it was super important that they heard?
It doesn't end in terms of the fact that,
fair. Yeah.
Like, I feel like even as like I look at my grandparents, it's like they're still trying to spiritually pour into my parents. And it's like, and you know, I've graduated college and my parents are still trying to spiritually pour into me. So it's not like they turn 18 and now it's the college ministry's job, or they turn 14 and now it's the high school guy's job, or they turn, 22 and it's now the senior pastor's job. It's like, no, like you just, that phrase that I've heard 100 times is you never stop being a parent.
Yeah.
And it's like your job never stops being that spiritual influence. And that goes for the parents and the leaders. I mean,
yeah,
was
that's right.
talking about it, how 2 of her students just got engaged.
Yep.
It's like whenever you step into full-time ministry, like I hope one thing that our kids know is it's not, I hope and pray that whenever you graduate, that's not goodbye.
Yep.
It's rather,
absolutely.
It's like whenever Paul in the church prayed over the disciples that they sent out, yet they would still write letters to each other and they still cared. It's not like, congratulations, you're going to go see the church of Macedonia. Good luck. But rather it's, let's spur one another on. Let's meet. Let's talk. Let's continue this development.
Yeah.
I think is so important. There isn't like the end point is redemption, right? In terms of we all move on and meet Jesus. That's the end point. But until then, we're always working. So that's why it's always important.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
always start.
Totally agree. Yep. Start now. Keep it going. I love it. Absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah. If there is a parent who has heard my story of my parents and feels similar, if there's a mom who just feels too broken and can't go back to her church with her kids, I just hope that she can be reminded and encouraged that her kids still need her, and God has given her this position as a mother for a reason. And same with a father, if maybe they're in that boat as well. Like they have been put in this family for a reason, and even though whatever divorce or estranged situation has happened, yes, it's tragic and it's painful, but God can still do something good from it, and it's not too late to get on your knees and ask for help and gather your community around you. But you're a parent for a reason, and your kids need that,
That's awesome. I love it. Thank you. All right.
I got one.
You got one more
last little
thing. All right, let's do it.
We talked a lot at the beginning, especially about having your kid in church, but not letting it stop there. And if that's you and you've been stopping there, I just want to encourage you that it's okay, and I don't want you to feel shame over
Amen.
that.
Absolutely.
But that absolutely it's never too late to start. It's never too small of a thing. When you have this simple, it may be a 2-second conversation one week and it may grow, but God can use even the smallest things. Just be faithful in that, and have confidence in the abilities that he's given you, that you can have those conversations even when you don't feel like it.
I love it. Absolutely. And here's the thing is if you need resources, we can help. That's
Absolutely.
what we're here for. Please reach out. I mean, you don't have to go to church here. Reach out and say, hey, I need to start having conversations with my kids about, their faith and what that means for them. And I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what question to ask when I go home. We're on it. We're ready. We can actually help you guys out with that. All right, guys. Well, hey, I thank you very much, Kimmy, Hannah, Garrett, for jumping on the podcast. I imagine that we could talk for a long time about some different things. I think we covered some really great topics today and provided a lot of great resources for parents. But at the end, we're here to help. And I know you guys are, and I know you guys love what you do. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to work alongside with you guys every single week. And so I love you guys very much.
Same.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, we appreciate you listening to Talk It Up. Look forward to you guys next time on our podcast with Barrett Johnson, who wrote the book The Talks, and we're excited to have him be a part of it. Catch you next time.